Mr. Andy, I know you are, but why don't you give us an explanation?
What, of me?
Of you. Yes, my friend.
Well, actually, it's a difficult one, isn't it? Andy McIndoe. I'm a horticulturist. I did a degree in horticulture. Actually, that was how I started my sort of career aspect, I suppose, of my life. I've worked for many years before that, but we'll talk about that later. And I did a degree in horticulture at Bath University. I was with Hillier nurseries and garden centres for 37 years.
Bloody hell.
And
long time.
Yeah, and I started as assistant manager of the garden centre in Winchester, which was the only one.
Okay. When it was real small, yeah.
That was back in 1978, and for the last few years, I was managing director. Before that, I was garden centre director, and I built the garden centre group. Really.
So how many people were there when you were MD then?
450. So that was actually, by the time I was managing director, I was actually sort of garden centres, nurseries, and also tree amenity nursery.
Okay, so covering all of it.
Yeah, so all aspects of it. So we were very much suppliers and retailers, which was interesting actually. It was interesting having the sort of multiple discipline, because in a way you were building something which was a retail
which is almost the product,
which was actually a competitor to the people you were supplying. Because
How was that then?
Well, we were growing and supplying garden centres nationally.
Yeah.
But we were also actually building big retail outlets, some of which were in competition. So it was an interesting balance. So you had to be sort of quite a diplomat, and work really sort of between. You know, we were all in it really, and we were actually genuinely all in it for the sort of. For the benefit of horticulture, gardening, and actually promoting gardening very much to the public.
Yeah.
And I think that was very much how I saw my role. Was actually I was very much sort of.
Trying to sell the idea, do you mean? Or?
Yeah, and I was a front man, so I was very much sort of involved with media and actually promotion of plants, of gardening, and actually I'd like to think keeping Britain gardening, because that was what actually that was what was earning the money. Really.
Yeah. So was that the biggest outlet, Hillier's, or was it one of the biggest outlets?
Oh no, I mean we weren't. I mean we were very much a private limited company. So I mean Hillier had. Certainly when I left, we had we'd had 14 garden centres, so with 14 garden centres, and with a turnover of sort of around 20 million.
Yeah, quite big. Didn't they supply the Olympics, or I got that wrong?
Yeah, no, that's the Olympic Park. Hillier supplied with trees, and also with some of the perennial for the meadows, the Piet Aldorf project, and so on. So yeah.
Was that when you were there?
Yeah.
Was that fun or pretty?
It was. Yeah, it was very. I mean, it was great profile for the company.
Yeah, I was about to say.
Crikey, because I mean, anything which is sort of which has got. Is a media bandwagon. I mean, and you can get on it.
Yeah.
What's wrong with that? What's not to like, really?
Too right.
And also, fabulous project.
Yeah. Yeah. So you're MD at the end, and that was about a 30-year stretch, which is massive. And then what are you doing now?
Well, I think I'd got to the stage realistically where I'd sort of. I mean, I started in horticulture.
Yeah.
I am a plantsman,
yeah.
And that's actually what I like to be recognised for.
Yeah.
Hillier, the Hillier journey was amazing because we started actually really. I mean, it's difficult for you to remember because I'm a bit of a dinosaur. But we started without computers.
Yeah.
We started without mobile phones. Anything that we take for granted today didn't exist.
Yeah.
And sort of when we finished, I mean, the world was a very different place. But one aspect of it, it's sort of, I suppose, the business aspect of running a big business suddenly became very detached from really what I was about.
Right, okay.
And I was sort of thinking, well, look, got in this actually. I'd always said, I'd carry on doing it as long as I enjoyed actually every day, because I think that one of the things that I would say to anybody is that you spend most of your life working.
Right, yeah.
So realistically, you're better off actually always doing something you want to do and you love.
Yeah.
And if you don't, do something else.
Yeah. And the thing is, I suppose, if you're not enjoying it, you're not going to reach your full potential.
You're never going to enjoy it. You're never going to reach your full potential, because I think that's actually very key. And I always feel really sorry when people say, I have to go to work to earn money, I look and people say, oh God, yeah, thank goodness it's Friday, and I think that's a shame. And so I'd got to the stage where I was thinking, right, okay, fine, I've done that. I've done coffee shops.
Yeah.
I've done toilets. I've done health and safety.
But that's listening to yourself, isn't it? Because that's something that, I mean, obviously I'm a lot younger. I'm only in my 20s, but I love what I do. Love it. That's why I built a company as well, which is, I just love being out. Everyone does as well. But I'll get days where I will just almost not want to go in because there's too many things going on or something isn't right. But I think the difference is if you can look at the reasons as to what the root stem is as to why you're actually not enjoying it and do something about it, then you can make sure that you're keeping on top of it. Because it's not always going to be like, oh yeah, I love it, or, you know what I mean? But if you pay attention to the little things that you can adjust to make it so that you are enjoying it and you're motivated and you can grow it, that's a big thing as well, I bet. Yeah. And I bet, managing so many people as well, it must have been your job to do that for them.
Yeah, and I think that is part of it. You do have a responsibility, actually. I think that's, if you are managing people, actually, if people are responsible to you, then you actually do have to have a genuine interest in them.
It can't just be
You can never
false.
just see it as a commodity. I think you do have to you do have to go through their sort of, their lives. It's that people say, I've been divorced, and I said, well, I've been through an awful lot of those. I've been divorced a lot of times. I've had a lot of kids. But I think that's actually all part and parcel of it. And I think the other thing actually that I'd got to the stage as well where I had actually sort of built a business, but it wasn't mine.
Yeah.
And I kind of still sort of thought, oh God, I haven't I would still like to run my own show. Yeah.
You kind of almost proved to yourself that you could do so much, I suppose.
Yeah, because you do it, but it's somebody else's money.
Yeah.
And although you actually you're responsible for it, and you actually you probably have more sleepless nights actually with somebody else's show almost than your own.
Yeah.
I still think it's very different. I mean, it's a different. I mean, now that I've been doing that for 3 years.
What, your own independent?
Yeah, I've been doing my own thing independently.
Yeah.
Would I go back? No.
No.
Why
not though? Why wouldn't you go back?
I think I quite like being my own. I was my own boss previously, but I suppose now it's it's different because you are only responsible to yourself.
Yeah.
So you have to keep on it, and you can't think, okay, fine, I'll do that next week, or I'll give it to somebody else because the somebody else is you.
Yeah.
And I think that's, I did 25 years of Chelsea Flower Show with Hillier.
Yeah. Where
I was responsible for the exhibit. I built this gold medal winning exhibit for 25 years. Amazing experience.
Oh, I bet.
Absolutely fantastic.
You got to meet the Queen as well, didn't you?
Met the Queen. I've met all the royals.
Yeah.
I've met, I will say, what peaks of your career where I kissed Catherine Jenkins. I had tea with Olivia Harrison.
Yeah, brilliant.
You joke with Ringo, and I had the pleasure of actually taking the Queen and the royal family around.
Nice.
Brilliant. But actually, and it teaches you an awful lot, actually. I think, not so much from doing that, particularly in terms of logistics, planning, the creative aspect is fabulous, but on the other hand, actually, you can be as creative as you like, but if you can't get your act together, it's a waste of time.
Yeah. Yeah.
And it's been interesting because I've carried on doing a different aspect of Chelsea, because for the past 3 years I've done Jardin Blanc, which was originally corporate hospitality, which we don't refer to that anymore because it's different. It's a completely different experience.
Right.
So I do the garden, I do the floral, I do a lot of the hosting.
Okay.
And, you know, when I first worked with, and that's working with Raymond Blanc, Sodexo and the RHS, and, you know, you sort of dealing with big organisations like Sodexo, you know, and they say, oh, can I speak to your logistics department? You say, yes, hello.
Let me just put you through. I think I
just
think
clarify
available.
this with marketing, and you say, yes, hello, how can I help? And it's and they sort of think that you've got this huge warehouse and this sort of, and you're thinking, where shall I hire a van from? You know, am I going to do this?
But that's
but
not
you can do it.
Yeah, and that's not a bad thing. Is that you know, it sounds like you're saying it's nice being able to control so many different things if you know what you're doing.
Yeah.
You know, you almost become all of these different 450 staff members that you had. You become all of them in one.
Yes, you do, and you have to. I think the key always, and it was always the key actually in what I was doing previously. But I think that was actually sort of one thing that I learned all the way along, is that planning an organisation is just absolutely key. And I do feel, you know, since I've been working on my own, and the people I come across, that is where people fall apart time and time again.
Massively. But do you know the thing on that? I see as well sometimes is that people plan, and you should plan, don't get me wrong.
Yeah.
But as you know, plans always change and they never stick to what you think. But what people do, I think, is they get flustered when they're in the moment, when they're in the situation, they can't adjust to that situation.
Yeah, no,
do you know what I mean?
is very true, and I think that is something that you learn. I mean, I now do a lot of gardens, you know, so I do a lot of garden consultancy. I do gardens for people, and you know, sort of, you have to be able to adapt.
Yeah.
You know, because you'll be all geared up, and you say that's definitely what we're going to do today, and then you get there, and the customer says, do you know, I've been thinking, and you think, oh God, all right, okay, right, let's go with it. But how you handle that situation is really key.
Yeah, yeah.
And I think you do have to be able to adapt. But the big thing really is that you can't ever sort of get up in the morning and think, oh, what should we do today, you know, and what do I need today? You've got to have thought of that the day before. It has to be on the van, ready to go. Yeah. You've got to be geared to it, because otherwise you're losing money. Yeah.
So on that then, you've got a couple of guys that you get in, they're pretty much full-time. I don't know if they're employed or not. But
no, they're not.
They're not,
actually,
but
no,
they
I work with self-employed.
Yeah, self-employed guys that do a lot of your, I don't know, manual work or planting or whatever.
They do manual work with me.
With you, yeah.
Never kid
I'm not taking that away from you.
Never, ever kid yourself, because I think people have this idea, don't they, that actually they're going to be... And some people seem to get away with it to a certain extent, but I do think if you want the sort of people on board for a long time, you know, your customer base, you have to make it happen. And
But the one thing, what a lot of people struggle with that go out on their own, they can manage everything themselves to a point, but as you know, you get a bigger client base, you can't manage it, you need to bring people in, and a lot of people don't know how to bring people in and how to manage them and how to plan for other people when it's not an employed situation.
Yeah, I think that's true. I think one thing I would say is that part of that, and I'm not very good at this, I have to admit, is actually managing, in a way, your workload. Because actually, I mean, it's one of the things that my wife always says. So if she picks up the phone, she'll say no. I pick up the phone and say, yeah, sure. Yeah. And I think, well, how am I going to do it? But then again, I know that I can deliver. Yeah. And I would always say, don't overpromise. If you can't do it, then communicate. And that's often part of it, is people give unrealistic expectations. Yeah. So somebody says, I really want this doing in the next 2 weeks. You say, yeah, fine. But if you are actually already committed, then you have got to be able to say, it'll be next month.
Yeah, I know, because it's so tempting, isn't it, to think that, okay, there's an opportunity there. I think I've got the manpower, and let's just go with it, see what happens. But the problem is that that's a situation where it's stressful for you, for the people that you're getting involved, the contractors, you know, and then ultimately, if you're not planned, if you're not organised, if the logistics aren't right, that's when your margins are just going to disappear.
Yeah.
And that's the problem that people have, I think, with staff, isn't it? Is that ultimately they're there to earn you more money. Otherwise, they wouldn't be there.
Yeah.
It's just an unnecessary stress. So it's trying to get that point where you know when to bring them in, how to manage them, and how to do it on a continual basis.
And if you can manage them, if you've got the time to manage them, because that's another thing, is that you do have to have enough capacity to be able to do that. And I think sometimes, I mean, certainly in the line of work that I'm in, you know, and you're in, but you're in actually a sort of specific skill set. I think because I'm very much in sort of landscape planting, gardens, people have this idea that you can actually just drag somebody off the street and they're immediately going to be able to do it. And it's quite interesting, because I'm just about to start this project, which is, it's a brand new contemporary build. It's quite an impressive house.
Right.
It's a very rural situation, and the guy actually, and who's actually who's built this is great. I mean, he's a great character actually. I've known him for quite a long time, but he said, he said, Andy, it's okay. He said, there's a load of guys working on the farm next door. If you need labour, just give them a shout, because he owes me a favour. And I said, well, look, James, that's absolutely fine, potentially on some things, but I really actually haven't got time to actually teach them how to plant, show them how to actually handle the plant material, show them actually basic techniques, and also who's covering the employer's liability, who's actually who owns them, if you like, in terms of the labour terms. And I think it's all of that has to go through your head.
But it doesn't, though, does it? But it should. Because the simple thing is, okay, there's work there, there's money to be made, let's do it, I'll work it out. But, you know, I've taken on a lot of big contracts recently where I've had to form whole new teams. And yes, I know these guys are qualified. Yes, I know what equipment they need. Yes, I know the industry. But the difference, I think, that I fell up a bit short on that situation was that to manage that quantity of staff, which is now like 25, I didn't have the systems, because I can manage a certain amount of teams, but when you multiply that, it's not like, okay, you just manage them the same way, because there's so many that it entails other things that you don't think about. And, you know, even doing a basic task, getting someone basic to do it, it still needs things, and they still need support.
And they also need very clear work guidelines. And I think that's one of the things that I think often falls apart, is that people don't say, you know, they don't lay down the law, is, you know, how you'll present yourself. How you'll speak to each other on site. Whether or not you will have an earphone stuck in. Whether or not you'll spend half your life on social media on the, you know.
It is,
and also the basics of how long you actually get for a tea break. How long you get for lunch, whether or not you are paid for lunch. You know, it's all of those basics
that you need to make sure you're covering.
That you need to know, and I think that's quite difficult. And I think, although actually the guys that I work with are self-employed, I still do actually lay down the law a little bit about.
But people want that structure as well.
I think you have to.
Yeah, and even if they resent it slightly, they still want it. And people are always going to moan. Don't get me wrong. You know, you must have experienced that with 450 staff. That's just natural. People like to do that. But it's hard to know, I think, certainly when you're working with less people, at what point they're moaning because they're moaning, or they've actually got a valid point that you need to implement something or change a way to help them work.
Yeah.
You know, I found that hard.
Yeah.
I must admit, but was that kind of, did that come into it when you had like the, you know, hundreds of people that were under you?
Oh, yes, absolutely. And I think it's, I mean, what you were saying about actually sort of forming new teams and taking people on and everything else. And, you know, you can look at people's qualifications, but it doesn't mean a thing in terms of work ethic. No, and work ethic is actually one of the hardest. And I think, I suppose also, I think, you know, if you're self-employed and you're working with other people, you actually really do have to drill down the discipline of making them realise, you know, understanding what they're doing and when they're doing it.
Yeah.
And it's a thing that I find with a lot of guys who are self-employed is that they say, oh yeah, it's all right, it's all on Google Calendar. So, okay, fine, great. Do you read it? Because there is no point looking at Google Calendar for the 16th of November. On the 16th of November, you need to have looked at it on the 12th, the 13th, and the 14th.
So that you can prep
so
for
that you can prep
comes.
for it. You know, there's no point whatsoever, actually. And, you know, a guy who's actually, who I do quite a lot of work with, he's working on a project.
Yeah.
Is one of my projects.
Yeah.
And, you know, today, actually, we sort of went through his van to make sure he's got and he said, can you come and check the van? I said, yeah, actually, that's great. But that, I think, is a real step forward, because he's actually sort of realised that if he gets on site and he hasn't got...
Then it's detrimental. Yeah, and he's realising that, No, that makes sense.
And I think that's one of the... I think the technology thing, actually, in some ways, has quite a lot to answer for.
In a positive or negative way?
Depending on how you use it.
Yeah.
I know people whose business lives run brilliantly on their Google Calendar or their organiser.
Yeah.
I also know ones that it's a total disaster.
I know. Because I found a mixture for me. I found that with software, logically...
Yeah.
A lot of things make sense to do because it's automated notifications, it's so many different things. But the problem is that when there's so many complex things that you need to input into it in order to get all the results and monitor it and, you know, get the results you want, if you lose track of doing it for such a short period, it just becomes a massive headache and you don't want to retreat to it and you just push it aside.
Yeah.
Which means you're not doing the most basic thing of doing, let's say, risk assessments. Because you've set up this amazing fancy folder and systemised way of doing it, that where it gets so overcomplicated, you just think, scrap it, and you haven't even got the basic one of it. So it's hard, isn't it? But then some things are amazing, because like we were saying about change earlier, when you've got so many different things and you need the planning to be right, if you've got one central hub where you can... just type all the adjustments on it and it will just fling, you know, all the new job sheets, all the adjustments straight away, and you don't have to reprint them. Like, you know, it's hard, isn't it? But
I think with it, I think the big thing, it's a bit the same with everything else though, isn't it? You still have to sort of check that actually, you still have to think it through and say, does this work? It's a bit like sort of, you know, it's like emailing a customer an invoice.
Yeah.
You know, it depends. A lot of the customer base actually respond much better to a letter, paper invoice coming through the post. Yeah. There's no doubt about it, because, you know, we all get God knows how many invoices trucking through.
Oh, yeah. No, it is. It all comes down to basics, doesn't it? But what I found it interesting what you're saying earlier about attitude with people.
Yeah.
Because something that a lot of people have asked us is that, how do you employ the right staff member at the beginning? Or not necessarily employ, how do you find the right contractors to work with you? Because we've got 25 people, and in order to get those good 25 people, we have been through bringing in probably about 150 people, and you get all the shit that goes through the funnel, and you just keep the good staff.
Yeah.
And you must have really experienced that in Hillier's, where how do you get to that good person that is going to be really productive for your company? Because it's even more important when you're just a one-man band and you need one other person to bring in. You can only just afford their wage, and you need to make sure that they're actually making you margins.
Yeah.
You know, that's something I think that people are really worried about, which is fair enough. You know,
I think it's a tricky one because I think you do. You can put quite a lot of effort into people.
Yeah.
And you get somebody that you think, God, this is great. But of course, as soon as you do that, then if they have ambition, you're liable to lose them.
Right. Yeah.
And in a way, I think that's almost something you have to accept.
Oh yeah.
And it was something that I suppose that, because I mean, you know, we already said, you know, I was with Hillier for nearly 40 years.
Yeah, long time.
And in that time, attitude to employment changed beyond belief.
Do you mean you had great people that were employed at the beginning and it kind of veered off, or the other way around?
No, you had great people who were employed at the beginning, who actually then stuck with it, and they stayed.
Okay.
Because at that time, people tended to do something, commit, and stick.
Right. Okay.
Okay?
Yeah.
I found as time went on, then you would get somebody and you think, God, they're brilliant, actually. Oh, they're wonderful. And they'd say, yeah, I think I'll go and live in Brighton. You know?
Yeah.
And I think that is very much a trend, realistically, is people don't actually stick for as long. I noticed that with my kids, you know, they're both in their late 20s.
Yeah, I mean, even Kelly, my partner, like, she will, you know, she's been at her job a few years, and then she changed. She did it for a recruitment firm, and they, you know, as soon as she got on the phone, you know, they had 10 jobs lined up, all better pay, and she did it. Every 2 months, she'd get a call with a job offer with an extra grand or two. And that never happened. It's like the temptation thing, isn't it?
Yeah. The good ones will always get offers.
Yeah, yeah.
And I mean, there's a young chap actually who he worked with me.
Right.
He wasn't actually even working for Hillier.
Okay.
Commercial Hillier. He was actually a student, and he worked for me at Chelsea.
Right.
And he was actually, I didn't even know, but he was underage at that time.
Yeah.
He was only 17 actually, and he. Because I remember we got stopped going into this club, and actually the bouncer on the door said, "Are you 18?" And I said, "Good God, do you think he'd be under 18 with me?" I said, "I'm old enough to be his father." And then actually about sort of 3 months later, he said, "Do you want to come to my 18th?"
Oh,
no! Anyway, that's another story. But he was going to go into landscaping, and I said, "Look, don't do it." I said, I said, "Come and actually work for me," and he did.
Right.
And he worked for the garden centre group, realistically, for quite a short space of time. Right. Then he moved over to the nursery side. He worked his way up through that. He did absolutely brilliantly.
Yeah.
Then, when I went, he left Hillier and went and worked for somebody else. He's head of production, actually, on sort of quite a big commercial nursery.
Okay.
Done very well. Went to see him the other day, and he's only been there a year, and he said, "I've been offered this other job." He said, "But it means relocating." And I said, "Well, Steve," I said, "you haven't been in this that long."
Yeah.
You know, because he left Hillier, went to somebody else, then he's gone to somebody else. And I said, "It's a difficult one." He said, "Well, I don't really want to move, you know, at this stage." And I said, "Have they offered you more money?" And he said, "Yeah." And I said, "How much?" And he said, "Another $8,000." He said, tricky one.
Oh no!
He said,
"What would?"
He said, "What would you do?" And I said, "Do you know? I don't know." I said, "I can't answer that."
I'd go to the current company that you're with, tell them the exact offer, and say that you want to be loyal to them, but they've got to understand that, you know.
Yeah, but it's a difficult one, isn't it? Because if you, in a way, if they say, sorry.
I know, but people love. I mean, that's something that I look at when people send me CVs, is how long they've been at their last place.
Yeah.
And a lot of people must do that nowadays, because if you're going to get someone that's going to skip after a year and a half, what's the point?
Well, I think that was the one thing I said to him. I said, you have got to look at your CV, and you've got to look at it and think, as an employer, what would I think? Because I think you know, as you say, you do sort of, but if you actually see that person, you like them. You always think that you'll be the one that perhaps they will actually stick with for longer.
I know. It's hard though, isn't it? Because you'll meet someone and, you know, they give you that persona and that attitude. And yeah, it can work out. Sometimes it doesn't. But I've had people that have come in and they've given me that. And then it, like, maybe less qualified people that you think, you know what, you'd settle here, you'd really do well here, and you'd really grow into the role. And then what happens is they start messing up. Some of them, you know, they start messing up. They start doing things bad. And I'm like, no, it'll be okay. Like, it'll be fine. To yourself. You know, you start saying that. And then the time goes on a bit more and you let a lot of things slip. And you almost, because of the convenience of not getting someone else in their role, you almost talk yourself into keeping them.
Oh, always.
Which is more detrimental, isn't it? I've done it. And, you know, I've only been going a few years, but it's amazing how bad it can be to keep someone on for the convenience of not just going out there and finding someone else.
Yeah.
You know.
It's interesting, isn't it? Because I think one of the things, if you ask me what I found most difficult at Hillier, the one thing I hate confrontation.
Right. Yeah.
I'd have to say that I've never liked confrontation with people, particularly people I have a sort of working relationship with, because I think it's difficult.
Yeah.
And I absolutely, I think when we first introduced the appraisal system, I absolutely hated it.
Yeah.
Having said that, the one thing that I did learn over the years was that actually if you'd worked with somebody for a long time, it was virtually impossible, you know, to actually sit down with somebody you'd work with every day and you'd say, now, what's your ambition? You know, what are you trying to achieve and everything? And they'd say, well, you know what I'm trying to achieve, for God's sake, as you know me, sort of.
Yeah.
And whereas if you started on that tack, being very straightforward with people to start off with, it was okay.
That's interesting, because it's like it's the routine of it then, isn't it?
And it's the routine of it. And I kind of think that actually it was always over-egged, because, you know, you have to have you're supposed to have your performance review form, and that was actually used as part of the employment record and everything else, which I found quite phony. But I do think if you have the discipline of actually realistically saying to people what you like and what you don't like and what you don't find acceptable at the outset, and what you do find acceptable and what you think they've done really brilliantly, I think that makes a big difference.
But it's that communication, isn't it? Yeah. That's you actually communicating with them and telling them indirectly that, look, I'm communicating with you exactly how I want. You need to talk back to me, so that we both know where we're at and we can work better together. Yeah. And that's hard sometimes, I think, especially in trades as well. People don't like to talk. They like to, you know...
Yes, and it does depend on the personality, doesn't it? I mean, crikey, you work with loads of different personalities. Some of them actually don't speak at all, and other ones can't shut up. Yeah, exactly. You know what that's like. Yeah. You know, and I think one has this idea, particularly as you're sort of primarily... you're sort of primarily a male workforce. And people always imagine that's going to be really sort of quite laddish, and it's going to be sort of, you know, lots of camaraderie, whereas actually it's not like that at all. No. I mean, generally you're sitting there actually like we were today discussing actually how to make the perfect beef burger.
It is, isn't it? Yeah.
And I think that's, but I think that's quite important. I do think that's sort of establishing sort of common ground, but also retaining, you know, if something...
Some level of structure amongst...
and if it's not acceptable, then you have to tell people. Yeah.
And be upfront with them. And not necessarily be confrontational, just be honest.
No, just say, look, actually this doesn't really work for me.
Because that's one thing that I don't necessarily don't like confrontation, but what I don't like is getting emotional in a work environment. So if someone came to me, so I had someone the other day who's a team leader who's really well respected. I respect him, he respects me, it's great. One of my great guys. And he was upset. He'd had a shit day. You know, he obviously has had probably, you know, a couple of days. And he came in and he was like, Tom, and this. And it wasn't logic, it was his emotion. And he was almost being unfair to me because that was all coming out. So I said, you know, I was like, look, listen, we're not going to get anywhere because you're talking to me as if you want me to retaliate to you. And I'm not going to do it. You just need to go away and we'll talk about this tomorrow when you're not like that. But the thing that I don't like is rising to someone else's emotion with your emotion, because then where do you get? You don't get anywhere.
Well, no, you wouldn't. And in a way, actually, what you have to in that situation, and I think you do have to think, is you have to be quite flattered that I actually can do that.
Yeah, true.
Because actually, if you were a much more distant character and you were not as close to him, you know, the fact that you could come and say, Tom, you really pissed me off. Yeah. That's actually quite a positive.
Because he feels open enough to do it.
Yes. Yeah. And I think that was one thing that I always tried to do, you know, when I had a huge staff team, was I wanted people to actually be able to say to me, actually, I'm really pissed off about this. I'm really, you know.
Give you an honest opinion.
Yeah, because if you don't get that, then what would happen is you would just get a letter of notice and you wouldn't turn up.
Because problems build into something that's so big,
and it just won't do it.
No.
And I think if you're unapproachable, then that's the reaction you get, and I think that happens so often. Yeah,
no, it is. So, all right then. So you've kind of covered pretty much everything that I was looking to ask, to be fair. But the main tip then to someone fresh that is running a company that needs to bring someone in to help them run a company, no matter what it is, horticulture, horticulture, whatever, you know, the few bullet points that you would say would assist. I think the main thing that you said that I picked up on was being upfront with each other about what you both want.
And I think you need to know. I mean, if you're employing somebody at the outset, crikey, you can go through as many CVs and everything as you like, and you can actually look at their track record and everything else. 90% of the decision will be on gut feeling. Do I like this person? Will I get on with them? Can I communicate with them? Can they communicate with me? Is there some sort of chemistry? And that might sound a bit corny, but it is key.
Oh yeah, of course it is.
And I think sometimes people are too analytical and they're too standoffish about it, and they have their interview form and they go through the same. You're supposed to go through the same questions and everything else, which I've never believed in. I've always I'd rather talk to them about actually making a perfect beef burger, because I think you learn more about them.
I was just about to say that you do, because the first few interviews I did for my first PA or whoever it was a lady in the office. And all these ladies applied, and I had these set out questions. And I was sat there with them, and I was like, right, would and right, wait, let me just write it down. And it was just so rigid, and it was almost as if I was in front of a crowd speaking publicly, and there was no connection, because I was so. But like you're saying, if you just pick up on one or two topics that you can let roll in however they want to answer it, you can pick up so much more from it, can't you? About their personality.
I think you're always better. The key is listen. Get them to talk and listen. And making notes is a no. It's absolutely write down what you.
I figured that one out.
Write down what you like afterwards, but everybody does it. It's one of the things you're taught. Actually, is I did an interviewing course years and years ago. Actually, they used to run a very good through the Agricultural Training Board. They used to run a very good interviewing 2-day course, and they bring in live candidates and you had to interview them. And it was fascinating, actually, because and you're taught about actually what you can ask people and actually the sort of politically correct stuff and all this sort of rubbish and actually making notes, asking open questions and everything else. And they video you and they play it back. Actually, it's fascinating. Absolutely.
Is in watching yourself, you'll portray
and also the other people.
Right. Okay.
When there was a sort of crowd of us, and there was. I mean, it was interesting because one guy was a pig farmer, and another guy had a poultry unit, and so on. And we all had sort of candidates which were relevant to us. But actually, the interviewer did say, he said, it's fascinating. He said, because you broke all the rules. He said, but you got to laugh. He said that made all the difference.
Yeah.
Because suddenly, as soon as you get somebody to relax and actually sort of...
They open up.
Because they choose you as much as you choose them.
Yeah.
And I think that is really important that you establish that at the outset. And it's the basic skills, actually, that today sometimes we forget, is you do need to listen.
Yeah.
You also need to read. You do need to actually read what somebody says.
Yeah.
I think you learn an awful lot by somebody's email.
What, their mannerism with it.
Yeah, and also how they reply to your email. Because actually, I always say that people actually never read the bloody email. They read the first 2 lines and they reply, and then later on you said something completely different and ask questions. They haven't answered any of that.
Yeah. Yeah, it's great stuff.
It's just a bit of sort of being thorough.
It's being thorough, but it's also going back to people skills, isn't it?
Yeah.
Because that's what working with people is. If they've got good people skills, then they do well working with you and working for you and with your clients. So, And it's been a pleasure, my friend.
Very good to talk to you. Thank
Indeed.
you.
Cold evening.
Yes.
Brilliant. Okay, TradeScaler take 2. Ah, sweet. There you go.
Was that all right?
That was amazing, Andy. Yeah.